Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and dear friends, it is an honor to stand before you today to discuss a topic that resonates deeply with all of us: breaking barriers, building bridges. Throughout history, humanity has been divided by race, religion, gender, social status, and even personal beliefs. These barriers have created conflicts, misunderstandings, and inequalities. But the great truth is these barriers are not permanent. They are created by society and they can be dismantled by society. Barriers, whether physical, social, cultural, or psychological, do not exist naturally. They are human made constructs that have been built over time due to fear, misunderstanding, and a resistance to change. From racial segregation to gender inequality, from economic disparity to religious intolerance, these obstacles have been formed by historical events, cultural norms, and systemic biases. However, just as these barriers were created by people, they can also be taken down by people. The power to remove them lies within individuals, communities, and institutions willing to challenge the status quo. Consider the abolition of apartheid in South Africa, the civil rights movement in the United States, or the global push for gender equality. Each of these milestones in history was achieved by individuals who refused to accept division as the norm. Barriers often exist because of ignorance and fear. When we do not understand a person, a culture, or an idea, we tend to build walls to separate ourselves. These walls protect our comfort zones but also isolate us from growth, new perspectives, and meaningful connections. The more we educate ourselves and engage with others, the weaker these barriers become. Dismantling barriers requires more than just good intentions, it requires deliberate action. It involves creating policies that promote inclusivity, ensuring equal access to opportunities, and fostering environments where everyone feels valued and heard. Schools, workplaces, and communities must take proactive steps to eliminate discrimination and build pathways for those who have been marginalized. Moreover, breaking down barriers is not just a responsibility of governments or large institutions, it is the responsibility of each individual. It starts with questioning our own biases, being open to conversations that challenge our perspectives, and standing up against discrimination when we see it. Even small actions such as engaging in a meaningful conversation with someone from a different background, advocating for equal rights, or supporting businesses and organizations that prioritize diversity can contribute to a larger movement of change. History has shown us that barriers, no matter how deeply rooted they may seem, are not indestructible. Societies evolve and mindsets change when people come together with a shared vision of unity and progress. The key is to recognize that change begins with us, with the choices we make, the actions we take, and the courage we show in standing up for what is right. Breaking barriers is never an easy task. It requires an immense amount of courage, resilience, and determination. The walls that divide people, whether based on race, gender, religion, class, or ideology, are often deeply ingrained in society, reinforced by centuries of tradition, prejudice, and misinformation. To dismantle these walls, one must be willing to challenge long standing beliefs, disrupt societal norms, and confront those who benefit from keeping barriers in place. Courage in breaking barriers means standing up against injustice, even when it is uncomfortable or inconvenient. Many people hesitate to speak out against discrimination or inequality because they fear backlash, rejection, or personal loss. However, history has shown that real change only happens when individuals dare to challenge the systems that oppress others. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Nelson Mandela, and Malala Yousafzai did not take the easy road. They faced threats, imprisonment, and even violence because they refused to accept the status quo. Their courage inspired movements that changed the world. But courage is not only about grand gestures or making headlines. It is also about the small, everyday acts that push back against bias and inequality. It means calling out a racist joke among friends, advocating for fair treatment in the workplace, or supporting policies that promote inclusion and diversity. Courage is in the teacher who refuses to let a student be bullied, in the employee who demands equal pay for equal work, and in the friend who stands up against prejudice even when no one else will. Breaking barriers also requires us to confront our own biases. Many of the divisions in society persist because people are unwilling to examine their own prejudices. It takes courage to acknowledge that we all have unconscious biases shaped by our upbringing, culture, and experiences. Recognizing these biases is the first step toward overcoming them. This means listening to others without defensiveness, educating ourselves on issues of inequality, and being willing to unlearn harmful beliefs. Furthermore, breaking barriers demands persistence and resilience. It is not a one-time act, but a continuous effort. Those who fight for justice often face resistance, criticism, and setbacks. Change rarely happens overnight, and progress is often met with opposition. Yet, those who have the courage to continue pushing forward, even in the face of adversity, are the ones who create lasting impact. In a world where it is often easier to stay silent, choosing to speak up is an act of bravery. Whether in small conversations or large-scale movements, every voice matters. Those who have the courage to challenge discrimination, fight for equality, and create spaces for inclusion are the ones who shape the future. Throughout history, remarkable leaders have stepped forward to challenge oppression, fight for justice, and create opportunities for those who had been denied them. These individuals, often facing immense resistance and personal sacrifice, broke down barriers that once seemed unbreakable. Their courage, vision, and determination reshaped societies, proving that change is possible when people refuse to accept injustice. However, while their contributions laid the foundation for progress, the work is far from finished. It is now up to us to carry their legacy forward. Consider the relentless fight for racial equality. Martin Luther King Jr. led the American Civil Rights Movement, advocating for a world where people would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. His leadership in peaceful protests, including the Montgomery bus boycott and the March on Washington, played a crucial role in the dismantling of segregation laws. Yet, even decades later, racial discrimination and systemic inequality persist, reminding us that the struggle for justice is ongoing. In South Africa, Nelson Mandela dedicated his life to ending apartheid, a system that legally enforced racial segregation and discrimination. After spending 27 years in prison for his activism, he emerged not with bitterness, but with a commitment to reconciliation and unity. His leadership led to the dismantling of apartheid, and he became South Africa's first black president. Yet, long after his presidency, the nation continues to grapple with economic disparity and racial tensions, proving that the battle for equality requires sustained effort beyond the work of one individual. Women's rights pioneers like Malala Yousafzai and Susan B. Anthony also paved the way for change. Malala, a young Pakistani activist, survived an assassination attempt by the Taliban for advocating girls' education. Instead of retreating in fear, she used her voice to champion education for all, becoming the youngest Nobel Prize laureate. Similarly, Susan B. Anthony fought tirelessly for women's suffrage in the 19th century, leading to the eventual right for women to vote. However, gender inequality remains a global issue, with disparities in education, wages, and leadership opportunities. Their work set the stage, but it is now our responsibility to continue pushing for true equality. The fight for left rights has also been shaped by fearless advocates like Harvey Milk, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. Harvey Milk, one of the first openly gay elected officials in the U.S., fought for policies that protected lesbian individuals from discrimination. Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera played crucial roles in the Stonewall riots, igniting a movement that demanded equal rights and recognition. While tremendous progress has been made, with same-sex marriage legalized in many countries and greater visibility for lesbian individuals, discrimination and violence against the community persist, signaling the need for ongoing activism. One of the most important lessons we can learn from these historical figures is that change is never achieved by one person alone, it is a collective effort. While these leaders made significant strides, they were supported by countless others who believed in the cause. Movements are driven by communities, by everyday people who refuse to remain silent in the face of injustice. Their contributions, whether large or small, are what keep progress alive. Another crucial takeaway is that every generation must take responsibility for advancing the work of the past. The leaders who paved the way did not solve every problem, they simply lit the torch. It is now in our hands to continue carrying that torch forward. We must educate ourselves about the injustices that still exist, support policies that promote equity, and hold ourselves accountable for the role we play in shaping the world. It is easy to admire historical figures and celebrate their achievements, but real honor comes from action. If we truly respect the legacies of those who broke barriers before us, we must ask ourselves, what are we doing today to build on their work? The fight for justice, equality, and inclusion is not over, it is ongoing, and it requires the active participation of every one of you. Breaking barriers is only the first step toward progress. The true challenge lies in what comes next: building bridges that connect people, communities, and nations. Building bridges is not just about creating physical or metaphorical connections, it is about fostering understanding, embracing inclusion, and encouraging collaboration to ensure that divisions do not return. It is a deliberate process that requires patience, open-mindedness, and a willingness to engage with those who may think, live, or believe differently from us. Fostering understanding: one of the greatest obstacles to unity is misunderstanding. Fear and prejudice often arise from a lack of knowledge about others. When people do not interact with those outside their social, cultural, or ideological circles, they rely on stereotypes, misinformation, or assumptions. Building bridges starts with a conscious effort to understand different perspectives, histories, and lived experiences. Understanding begins with education and exposure. Reading about different cultures, traveling to new places, engaging in conversations with people from diverse backgrounds, and listening to their stories help break down misconceptions. Schools, workplaces, and media platforms play a crucial role in promoting cultural awareness and ensuring that people are equipped with knowledge that fosters empathy rather than division. However, understanding is not just about learning, it is about active listening. Too often, people listen to respond rather than to understand. They approach discussions with preconceived notions and dismiss opposing views without true engagement. To build bridges, we must listen with an open heart and a genuine curiosity to understand why people think and feel the way they do. This does not mean we must always agree, but it does mean respecting different perspectives and seeking common ground. Embracing inclusion: true bridge building goes beyond understanding, it requires inclusion. Inclusion means ensuring that everyone has a seat at the table, that voices from all backgrounds are heard, and that no one is left behind because of their race, gender, religion, disability, or socioeconomic status. It is not enough to simply tolerate differences. We must celebrate and integrate them into the fabric of our societies. Inclusive societies are stronger because they benefit from diverse talents, ideas, and perspectives. When people from different backgrounds come together, innovation flourishes, creativity expands, and communities thrive. Whether in business, education, or politics, inclusivity ensures that all voices contribute to decision making processes, leading to more balanced and fair solutions. However, inclusion does not happen by chance, it must be intentional. It requires policies and actions that remove barriers to participation. For instance, workplaces must actively work to close gender and racial wage gaps. Governments must ensure equal access to education and healthcare, and communities must provide opportunities for marginalized groups to be seen and heard. Encouraging collaboration once understanding and inclusion are fostered, the next step in building bridges is collaboration. Working together toward common goals is one of the most effective ways to strengthen connections and overcome divisions. Collaboration is about recognizing that we are stronger together than apart. It is about pooling resources, knowledge, and skills to address challenges that affect everyone, whether it be poverty, climate change, or social injustice. Collaboration is especially important in times of crisis. Natural disasters, economic downturns, and global pandemics have shown us that humanity is interconnected. When people, organizations, and nations come together to support each other, they create lasting bonds that transcend differences. We have seen this in global humanitarian efforts. Medical breakthroughs achieved through international partnerships and peace treaties that have ended decades long conflicts. Building bridges through collaboration also means creating spaces where dialogue can replace division. Conflicts often arise when groups refuse to engage with one another, choosing instead to remain in their own ideological corners. By fostering discussions and encouraging partnerships between different communities, societies can move toward solutions that benefit everyone. The responsibility to build bridges, building bridges, is not just the responsibility of governments, corporations, or world leaders, it is the responsibility of every individual. In our daily lives, we have the power to create connections, whether by reaching out to someone from a different background, challenging biases in our own communities, or advocating for policies that promote inclusivity. While it may seem easier to stay in familiar circles, real progress comes when we step outside our comfort zones. It requires making the effort to understand those we may disagree with, welcoming people who have been historically excluded, and working together to create a world where unity is stronger than division. One of the most powerful tools in breaking barriers and building bridges is empathy. In a world where people are often divided by differences in opinion, culture, or beliefs, listening with empathy allows us to see beyond those differences and connect on a human level. Empathy is not just about feeling sympathy for someone, it is about truly understanding their emotions, experiences, and perspectives. When we listen with empathy, we open the door to meaningful conversations, deeper relationships, and genuine solutions to the issues that divide us. However, empathy alone is not enough. If we want to build unity, we must also seek common ground. Too often, people focus on what separates them rather than what unites them. Whether in politics, religion, or social issues, differences tend to dominate conversations, leading to hostility and misunderstanding. But despite these differences, there are always shared values and goals that can bring people together. Finding and focusing on these commonalities is essential in creating harmony in communities, workplaces, and even nations. The power of listening with empathy, is more than just hearing someone's words, it is about understanding their emotions and intentions behind those words. It requires being present, setting aside judgment, and giving full attention to the speaker. In today's fast-paced, digital world, where conversations are often reduced to social media arguments and sound bites, true listening is becoming a lost skill. People are quick to react but slow to understand. When people feel heard, they feel valued. They feel that their experiences and perspectives matter. This creates a foundation of mutual respect and trust. Even in disagreements, when individuals take the time to truly listen, the conversation becomes less about winning an argument and more about understanding each other's point of view. One of the biggest barriers to unity is assumptions. People often assume they know what others think or believe without taking the time to ask questions or engage in real conversations. This leads to misunderstandings, stereotypes, and divisions. By listening with empathy, we replace assumptions with knowledge and replace division with connection. For example, conflicts between different cultural or religious groups are often fueled by misconceptions. But when individuals from different backgrounds take the time to listen to each other's stories, they begin to see the humanity behind the labels. They realize that, at the core, people everywhere want the same things: love, respect, security, and a sense of belonging. Seeking common ground, finding unity in shared values. While it is natural for people to have different perspectives, focusing only on differences leads to division. Seeking common ground means actively looking for areas of agreement, shared values, and mutual goals. This does not mean ignoring differences or pretending they do not exist, but rather shifting the focus to what can unite rather than divide. History has shown that societies make progress when people come together around shared goals. Movements for civil rights, gender equality, and social justice have been successful because they united people from different backgrounds who believed in a common cause. Even individuals who may disagree on some issues can often find agreement on others. For example, in politics, opposing sides may have vastly different ideas about how to achieve progress, but they can still agree on the fundamental goal of wanting a better future for their children. In workplaces, employees from different cultural backgrounds may have different traditions, but they can unite in their desire for a fair and inclusive work environment. Seeking common ground requires a willingness to compromise. It does not mean that everyone must think the same way, but it does mean being open to different perspectives and recognizing that solutions often lie in collaboration rather than conflict. When people prioritize understanding and shared goals over personal pride or ideological battles, they create spaces where unity can flourish. Practicing empathetic listening and finding common ground in everyday life, the ability to listen with empathy and seek common ground, is not just for leaders or activists, it is a skill that can be applied in everyday life. In relationships, whether romantic, familial, or friendships, disagreements are inevitable. However, by truly listening to each other's feelings and looking for common ground, relationships can grow stronger rather than break apart. In workplaces, teams function best when employees respect and understand each other. A diverse team brings different perspectives, but when members listen with empathy and focus on shared goals, productivity and innovation thrive. In communities, divisions based on race, class, or political ideology can be overcome when people engage in conversations with an open mind, seeking ways to collaborate on issues that affect everyone. On social media, where conflicts can escalate quickly, practicing empathetic listening before responding can prevent unnecessary arguments and foster more constructive discussions. It is important to remember that listening with empathy and seeking common ground does not mean abandoning one's own values or beliefs. It simply means approaching interactions with an open heart, a willingness to learn, and a commitment to finding solutions rather than creating more division. Education is one of the most powerful forces for breaking down barriers and building bridges. When people are informed, they are better equipped to challenge ignorance, question stereotypes, and advocate for a more inclusive world. Knowledge empowers individuals to think critically, act compassionately, and recognize the shared humanity in all people. Education is not just about acquiring facts, it is about developing the ability to see beyond one's own perspective and understand the experiences of others. The role of education in breaking down barriers, many of the world's most harmful divisions, racial discrimination, gender inequality, religious intolerance, and economic disparity, are perpetuated by a lack of understanding. When people do not have access to information or are only exposed to a limited, biased view of history and society, misconceptions flourish. This ignorance can lead to fear, prejudice, and hostility toward those who are different. For example, throughout history, oppressive systems such as apartheid, segregation, and caste based discrimination have thrived in societies where people were intentionally miseducated or denied access to knowledge. The truth was hidden, distorted, or rewritten to serve the interests of those in power. However, when education is used to reveal the realities of injustice, it becomes a tool for liberation and progress. Education not only helps individuals recognize discrimination, but also equips them with the skills and knowledge to challenge it. When people learn about the struggles of marginalized communities, about the history of civil rights movements, and about the ways in which social and political systems operate, they become more aware of the role they can play in creating change. Moreover, education fosters critical thinking. It teaches people to question the narratives they have been given, to analyze media and political messages with discernment, and to seek multiple perspectives before forming opinions. A well-educated society is one that does not blindly accept division but actively works to bridge gaps through understanding and informed dialogue. The power of awareness in creating change. While formal education is important, awareness extends beyond the classroom. Raising awareness through storytelling, art, media, and activism plays a crucial role in breaking down barriers. Some of the most impactful movements in history were fueled by raising public consciousness about hidden injustices. For example, the civil rights movement in the United States gained momentum as more people became aware of the brutal realities of racial segregation and police violence through televised protests and first-hand accounts. The Me Too movement shed light on the pervasive issue of sexual harassment and abuse, leading to legal and societal changes worldwide. The climate change movement has been driven by increased awareness of environmental destruction, pushing governments and corporations to take responsibility for sustainability. When people become aware of an issue, they are more likely to take action. Awareness leads to conversations, conversations lead to policy changes, and policy changes lead to a better world. Inclusive education, a key to building bridges to truly dismantle barriers. Education must be inclusive, it must represent all voices, histories, and perspectives. Unfortunately, many traditional education systems have excluded or downplayed the contributions of certain groups. Women, indigenous communities, black and brown leaders, left figures, and other marginalized groups have often been erased from textbooks and mainstream narratives. Inclusive education ensures that students grow up with a more complete and accurate understanding of the world. It allows people to see themselves reflected in history, fostering a sense of belonging and self-worth. At the same time, it teaches people to respect and value experiences different from their own. For example, gender studies help dismantle stereotypes and promote equality. Multicultural education fosters respect for different traditions and worldviews. LGBTQ history raises awareness about the struggles and achievements of queer communities. Disability studies promote accessibility and inclusion for all. When students learn about the diverse struggles and triumphs of people from all walks of life, they are less likely to internalize prejudice and more likely to grow into adults who champion equality. Education as an ongoing process. It is important to remember that education and awareness are not one-time events but lifelong journeys. Learning does not stop after school or university, it continues through daily experiences, conversations, and personal growth. Being truly educated means being open to new perspectives, challenging one's own biases, and continuously seeking knowledge. Even those who believe they are well informed must recognize that there is always more to learn. Societies evolve, histories are rediscovered, and new voices emerge. Staying engaged with books, documentaries, podcasts, public discussions, and global events ensures that individuals remain aware and adaptable. Moreover, education should not just be for personal growth, it should be shared. Those who have access to knowledge have a responsibility to spread it, whether by mentoring others, speaking up against misinformation, or supporting educational initiatives. Knowledge is a privilege, and sharing it is one of the most effective ways to build a more just and unified world. While conversations about breaking barriers and building bridges are important, talk alone is not enough to create real change. Words can inspire, educate, and bring awareness, but true transformation happens only when people take action. Change does not come from passive hope or empty promises, it requires sustained effort, commitment, and the willingness to challenge the status quo. Many people recognize the need for a more just and inclusive world, but recognition alone does not solve problems. It is easy to express support for social causes on social media, attend events, or make statements about unity, but without real follow through, these actions risk becoming performative rather than impactful. History has shown that every significant movement for change was driven by those who were not just willing to speak up, but who also put in the work to turn their words into reality. The importance of commitment to change, breaking barriers, and building bridges is not a one time effort. It is an ongoing process that requires dedication. The fight for civil rights, gender equality, economic justice, and inclusion has taken years, decades, even centuries, and while progress has been made, the work is never fully complete. Each generation has a responsibility to push forward, build on the efforts of those who came before, and continue striving for a better world. Commitment means being willing to do the difficult, uncomfortable work, whether that involves challenging one's own biases, calling out injustice even when it is inconvenient, or actively seeking ways to uplift others. It is not always easy, and there will be resistance from those who benefit from maintaining the status quo. However, meaningful change has never come without effort, sacrifice, and persistence. It is important to recognize that commitment to change should not be based on temporary emotions. Too often, people are motivated to take action only when a major event captures media attention, whether it is a human rights crisis, a case of racial injustice, or a political upheaval. However, change is not a trend. It requires consistent engagement, even when the spotlight fades and when progress feels slow. Taking action at every level, action does not always have to be on a grand, global scale. While systemic change is necessary, individuals also have the power to make an impact in their everyday lives. Personal level, change begins with self-awareness and personal growth. This means examining one's own biases and being willing to unlearn prejudices. Educating oneself continuously about issues affecting different communities. Practicing inclusion by building relationships with people from diverse backgrounds. Speaking up when witnessing discrimination, whether in a workplace, social setting, or online. Community level, true change happens when individuals work together to create inclusive and supportive environments. This can be done by volunteering with organizations that support marginalized communities, supporting local businesses and initiatives that promote diversity and equity, advocating for change in schools and workplaces, ensuring that policies reflect fairness and inclusion, creating spaces for dialogue and understanding where people from different backgrounds can connect and share experiences. Systemic level, while individual actions are important, breaking barriers on a larger scale requires pushing for policy changes and institutional accountability. This includes voting for leaders and policies that prioritize equity, justice, and inclusivity, holding corporations, governments, and institutions accountable for discriminatory practices, joining movements and organizations that are working towards systemic change, using platforms to amplify voices of those who are often unheard in mainstream discussions. Consistency in action. Small steps lead to big change. One of the biggest misconceptions about creating change is that it requires grand, dramatic gestures. While historic moments of protest and activism are powerful, change is also built through small, consistent efforts. Every time someone chooses to stand up for what is right, educate themselves, or extend kindness and understanding, they contribute to a larger culture of inclusivity and justice. For example, a teacher incorporating diverse perspectives into their curriculum helps shape more open-minded students. An employer implementing fair hiring practices creates more equitable workplaces. A person choosing to challenge discriminatory comments instead of staying silent helps shift social norms. Each of these actions, though seemingly small, contributes to a ripple effect that extends far beyond one individual. The need for courage and resilience taking action is not always easy. Speaking out against injustice may invite criticism or backlash. Advocating for inclusivity may require uncomfortable conversations with family, friends, or colleagues. Standing up for marginalized communities may mean going against the status quo. However, real change has never been comfortable. History remembers those who had the courage to persist even when the odds were against them. From abolitionists fighting against slavery to activists leading modern human rights movements, progress has always been driven by those who refuse to stay silent. Commitment to change also requires resilience. There will be setbacks, moments of frustration, and times when progress feels too slow. But giving up is not an option because every effort, no matter how small, brings society one step closer to justice and unity. Breaking barriers and building bridges is not just a philosophy, it is a responsibility. It requires each of us to step beyond our comfort zones, to challenge outdated beliefs, and to commit ourselves to a world that values unity over division. True change does not happen overnight, nor does it happen in isolation. It is built through daily choices, through moments of courage, and through the unwavering belief that a better, more inclusive world is possible. Let us not wait for others to take the first step. Let us be the ones who listen with empathy, seek common ground, educate ourselves and others, and take action where it matters. Whether in our families, workplaces, communities, or on the global stage, we all have a role to play in shaping a future where bridges replace walls, where understanding triumphs over ignorance, and where unity becomes stronger than division. So today I leave you with a challenge: be the bridge, break the barriers, lead with kindness, and never stop working toward a world where everyone belongs.